This is the current tripod setup, and I'm wanting to start to make YouTube videos for our business. And so I'm going to need something a little bit more mobile and a little bit smaller of a footprint than this. This takes up quite a bit of space, and it's hard to get well-positioned shots. So this is a rough idea of what I want. Originally I had planned on making this swivel, and then I realized that I can just have the casters swivel, and it won't be quite as smooth, but it's going to be a whole lot simpler. I can have this leg come out further and it not take up so much space because all the weight is guaranteed to be in one direction. I don't have to account for 360 degrees of rotation. I think I'm going to make this post kind of a cross like this out of plywood, and that should be plenty sturdy. There shouldn't be any flex in it, and I think I'll be able to make it a lot lighter than steel, and it'll be cheaper as well. I do have some springs ordered, so they're going to go something like this and something like that. That'll help hold up the weight so I don't have to have the bolts so tight to keep friction holding it up. I'm thinking of trying to put some bushings in these arms, just so it runs a little smoother. So I think we have some scraps of PEX. Yes. So now we got to find a bolt that fits that. So that's a little tight. That's a little loose. So I think we need some 7/8 bolts, which we don't have, unless there's some in here. So no luck in here, but I did realize I have some of these oak dowels, and I also have some larger PEX, and these fit in here pretty good. There is a little bit of slop, but I think if I undersize the hole that this presses in, it'll shrink it just a tiny little bit. So a 7/8 Forstner bit actually gives this a really nice press fit, but it didn't compress it enough to make that dowel fit tight. So I'm going to experiment with wrapping some tape around the dowel. It's better. A little more tape. That's perfect. So this gives it a nice plasticky surface to rub against, so it's pretty smooth. I'm not sure how long this would last. I don't see how that would wear out. So I'm going to take my arms and I'm going to put a block of wood behind it, clamp it in the vise, and then use that as a stop so I can cut my PVC or my PEX to the right size. And I could use the miter saw with a stop block, but when you're cutting a piece that small, it tends to kind of wiggle around when you get to the end of the cut, and then it can catch the blade and ruin your piece. I want it to end up folding flush so that this bar can be straight down and this bar can also be straight down. So in order for that to happen, I have to make sure that this pivot point and this pivot point are at least as far apart laterally as one of these arms is wide. Otherwise, they'll interfere when you go to fold it down. So you can see I've gone 7/8 over here, which is half the width of my arms, and 7/8 up, and that's where my first pivot is. Then I went 5 inches up and 1 3/4 inches over. That's where my second pivot is. And then I checked my clearance so that these arms don't hit each other when they're pivoting. And so I think this was in 2 1/4. And then again, over 1 3/4 inches and down 5. Then this is one of the end blocks, and it's basically just this cut in half. Okay, so you can see here, this is really loose. This is a pretty good fit though. I need my tape to only come in contact with the PEX. So what I'm gonna do to get that, I don't have any tape that wide. I'm gonna take a blade and I'm gonna put it on a piece of plywood, and I'm just gonna score this around. I went ahead and cut all the dowels. I left them a little oversized so I can just eyeball the center with this tape, and then once I get it all assembled, I'll cut the dowels flush. So I stapled these blocks in here, and then I'm going to use these pins for alignment, and then drill. First I'm going to drill a hole for this washer about 1/4 inch deep, and then that'll sit in there countersunk on either side, and then I'm going to drill a through hole 3/8 for the bolt. So we do have a slight misalignment here. If I put this dowel in, you can see I get this nice and parallel here, and now this hole does not line up. So when I had it assembled, it was basically doing that, and you can't see it, but it tapers down to the gap is basically nothing at the end. So I think I need to just remake this piece, and that will solve the problem. Okay, I got the new one made, and it fits perfect. That took about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes. That was definitely worth it. Okay, I bounced around a couple ideas on how to assemble this beam. What I'm gonna do is just draw a center line on here, all the way down, and then I'm gonna put one above it, one below it, just like that. And that'll kind of make an X, and it should be really rigid, and I'll just put a screw in here. I'm going to keep this base as small as possible, so I think what I'm going to do is mount the arm and then see if it's tippy. If it is, I'll put some counterweight here, but if it's not, I'm just going to inch the casters back until it is, and then I'll mark it and cut it just to make this a little smaller and make sure it's still stable. So it is pretty tippy. I've got some weights I'm going to attach as far back as possible, and hopefully that'll do it. The weights are working really well to keep it from tipping forward, but it's wanting to tip this way pretty easily, especially when this wheel swivels. It just shifts the support over. Okay, so I just figured something out about how important the position of these clamps are, or where the spring mounts. So you can see here, the spring is perfectly parallel to this arm. And then as soon as I move it away, there's this angle that starts to happen where this is on this side of the arm. So as I go up, you can see that angle starts to grow, which gives the spring more power, more pulling power. So as it goes up, the angle gets larger and larger, and that's how it's still able to hold it up here, even though technically the spring is pulling less, it has the angle helping it. Okay. Okay, got the tape wrapped around there. Had to put the bolt in first and then wrap the tape. And then we can slide this back on. I'm gonna throw some Loctite on that. Same thing, tape on the other side of the bracket because I've got a bolt head there. In the next video, I'll be building the new base and adding a swivel for the arm. I'll also be adding a battery for charging my phone and powering a light.